In the summer of 1590, an Englishman named John White stepped back onto a small island off the coast of North Carolina, expecting to find the colony he'd left behind 3 years earlier. 115 people. His daughter, his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. Instead, he found nothing. The houses were gone, taken apart and carried off. The people had vanished. And carved into a wooden post at the edge of the settlement was a single word: Croatoan. For 400 years, that word has fed one of history's favorite ghost stories, an entire colony that stepped off the map into thin air. But the ghost story skips the ending. Because we're now fairly sure we know what happened to those people. They weren't taken, and they didn't vanish. The clue was carved right there on the post, and archaeologists have finally started digging where it points. Let's back up. In 1587, England was trying to plant its first permanent colony in the New World, and John White led about 115 settlers, men, women, and children, onto Roanoke Island on the Outer Banks. It went badly almost at once. They were short on supplies, the planting season had passed, and relations with some of the nearby tribes had already curdled after an earlier, uglier English expedition. So the colonists pushed White to sail back to England for help. He didn't want to leave, his whole family was there. But he went. And then the timing turned disastrous. The year White reached England was the year the Spanish Armada came. England threw every seaworthy ship into the war with Spain, and one small colony across an ocean simply had to wait. It took him 3 long years to get back. When he finally landed on Roanoke in August of 1590, on what would have been his granddaughter's 3rd birthday, the place was empty. But it hadn't been ransacked, and that is the part that matters. There were no bodies. No graves, no sign of a battle. The houses hadn't been burned, they'd been carefully taken apart, the way you dismantle something to move it, not the way you run. And before he'd sailed, White had made a plan with the colonists. If they ever had to leave, they would carve their destination somewhere he could find it. And if they left in danger, under attack, they would add a cross. White found Croatoan carved on the post, and the letters CRO on a nearby tree. And no cross. No cross anywhere. In other words, the colonists had left him a forwarding address and told him they left on their own terms. So what was Croatoan? It wasn't a monster, and it wasn't a curse. It was a place and a people. Croatoan was the island we now call Hatteras, just down the coast, and it was home to a friendly native nation, the Croatoan, the one group in the region the English had actually gotten along with. The message was almost ordinary. We have gone to live with the Croatoan. But White, agonizingly, never reached them. A storm blew up as he tried to sail south, his ships were battered, his crew refused to risk the shoals in the dark, and he was forced to turn back to England. He never saw his family again. And so the colony became lost, not because the people disappeared, but because the one man searching for them got turned back by weather and never reached the island they'd told him to check. For centuries, that's where it sat, a mystery with an obvious answer that nobody could prove. Until archaeologists started digging in the 2 places the evidence actually pointed. On Hatteras Island, the old Croatoan land, they have been pulling up English objects mixed right in among native ones, in the same layers, the same households. A sword hilt, gun parts, a writing slate. And most tellingly, in the last couple of years, they found hammerscale, the tiny flakes of iron that fly off when you forge metal on an anvil. The Croatoan did not work iron. Only the English did. Someone was doing English blacksmithing inside a Croatoan village. And about 50 miles inland, at a spot marked, of all things, by a patch hidden on one of White's own maps, a second team has been digging up broken English pottery, the everyday kind you cook and store food in, not trade trinkets. Two sites, two groups of English settlers, living not as captives but as neighbors, worked deep into native communities. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is a mystery that attracts a lot of nonsense, and not every archaeologist is fully convinced. Some argue a handful of English objects could have been traded rather than lived with. And nobody has yet found a grave or a letter that closes the case beyond all doubt. So this is not a signed confession, but it is, by a wide margin, the best supported answer we have, and it quietly puts the spookier ones to bed. There were no aliens. There was no supernatural power in the word on the post. The famous Dare stones, rocks supposedly carved by the survivors, are almost entirely a 1930s hoax. The likeliest truth is gentler, and I think better. The lost colony survived by ceasing to be a colony. They broke up, walked into the communities that already knew how to live on that land, and became part of them. Which turns the whole story inside out. For 400 years, we've called them lost, and told it as a tragedy of vanishing. But lost was always a word about us, about White straining to find them, about England losing the thread. From the colonists' own side, it may not have been a disappearance at all. It may have been a decision. Faced with starving alone on an island, or joining the people who had offered to take them in, they chose to survive, even knowing their grandchildren would be Croatoan, and not English. The mystery of Roanoke was never really where the colonists went. They carved that on a post, in plain sight. The real mystery is why it took us so long to believe the answer they left us.